comfortable being recorded, now is the time to drop, and you can view the recording tomorrow when we send it out. We are going to get started by asking a few of the questions that we received beforehand, but if anyone here today has a question come to mind at any point during the webinar, feel free to type it into the chat and we'll get it answered in the order they come in. If we do run out of time, we'll put together a blog post with all the questions and answers mentioned today and send that along with the recording tomorrow. All right, so now that we are ready to rock, Lee, Andrew, and Trevor, did you guys want to get started by introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Lee Harper. I'm the director of our data science and AI practice at Toulon. Been doing this stuff for about 9 years now, all in all. So, yeah. Andrew?
My name is Andrew Kraemer. I'm a data science lead here at Toulon. I've been in data for the past many years. I've been a data scientist for about 5 years now, specialize on the ideation and building of models, helping put them in production.
Yep. My name is Trevor Philley. I'm the machine learning engineer here at Toulon. I'm very early in my career, and I'm specializing in retraining and deploying of models through Azure and Azure DevOps.
Awesome, thank you guys. So I guess we can get started with our questions. So we have a couple that did come in via email. So one of the first ones is, how did you all get started in data science? You can all answer it, you can answer it too, whatever you guys.
So I kind of fell into it by mistake way back when. I have a fairly standard background for kind of, a person who's been in the field for a while. I've got a PhD in physical chemistry. And so post PhD, I actually taught in school for a while. I was a high school teacher, and burnout, that is a really hard career. Anyone who tells you otherwise has never done teaching before in their lives. So I was looking for a job I could just kind of do, and there was a company nearby looking for a person that knew both spectroscopy and statistics, both of which I'd done as part of my degree. And turned out it was, we were doing machine learning research into cancer diagnosis. That's what they were doing. So I kind of fell into it that way back in 2013. But this is a kind of a thing with the field. I got out of date. I did various things. I wrote in various languages, none of which were the current languages du jour in data science, which is mostly R, Python, SQL, and a few other bits and pieces. So I actually went back and did a boot camp kind of later on in my career to go and learn Python and SQL, which I did not know at the time. So I've kind of entered and re-entered the field in many respects, kind of due to getting out of date. So that's how I got in.
Great. Yeah, so I've got my route is a little, as data science has gotten more popular, stories like mine have gotten more common. The traditional route is often, you get the master's or PhD in statistics or some sort of quantitative field, and you move in. I, on the other hand, studied economics in my undergrad and then went into finance as an analyst. I was able to have a couple different roles in there, and I found that where I was most useful and most interested was actually not in finance, but in being able to answer questions with data and getting really excited and good at the tools that I had at me, because I realized I was not going to be better at finance than anybody, but I could be the best person at Excel. And then later I had a position that was SQL. Then I was like, I can be the best person at SQL. From there, I moved into an analytics role at a startup, healthcare startup, and they wanted me to do all of the analytics and, in terms of database and visualizations and storytelling and automated dashboards for a startup. I was able to learn a ton, but it was a startup, so I had to use a Mac, and I was starting to essentially break Excel on my Mac. So I started to teach myself R in order to create pipelines that could do the visualizations and get the power that I needed. And it was really hard because I did not have a technical background. I hadn't programmed outside of Excel or SQL. From there, I started to get into the R community, going to meetups that exposed me to a lot of the power of R in terms of statistics and all that sort of thing. Then kind of started learning a lot about machine learning, doing courses, et cetera, et cetera. When I'd run out of things to easily teach myself at the company I was at, I went to a boot camp, which is actually where I met Lee, and doubled down on Python and really kind of ingrained myself in kind of the philosophy and processes of machine learning. Since then, I was able to work at a data science company that was hiring a number of us, again, Lee included, and that was like a great learning space to apply all the things that we just picked up. So you don't if people have a question more about it later, you don't necessarily need a PhD or a master's to get into the field, though it does make it easier, but there are other routes in.
All right. Yeah, now it's time for my fun story. Mine is very the least traditional of the group. So yeah, starting out, fresh out of high school, I went to the Air Force. Uh, After getting out of there, it was again in the Air Force. It was not a technical position, not as far as a data position or anything like that. Uh, and I did a lot of searching around, bounced around from a number of different jobs. Eventually, I kind of took a good look inside and said, I want to try and find something I'm truly interested in. After doing some searching, I found a data science boot camp. Went through that, really enjoyed it, especially the machine learning aspects of it. It really kind of caught my eye, it really resonated with me. And after the boot camp, I got an internship with a different company, working with Lee and Andrew. And that was my first exposure to machine learning operations, and really my first real exposure to Azure and DevOps and a number of different tools. And I truly enjoyed it. When I went through, building up pipelines to train and deploy models, that was something that really got me excited. And luckily enough, I was able to kind of follow Lee and Andrew over here to Toulon, and yeah, I'm a full-fledged machine learning engineer now, and really enjoying it.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. It's very cool how you all have such different paths, but you're all here. And some of your answers, actually all of them, lead us to our next question, which is, are online courses or boot camps enough to get into the field? Now, you guys all have taken a boot camp, but I know you all have additional education as well. So if one of you guys wanted to answer that.
I would say that the easiest way to get a job in the field in data science is to have 7 years of data science experience. Unfortunately, that's not really realistic. The second easiest thing would be to come from a top tier PhD program and in a technical field and be able to apply your things in fields like that. I think that online learning is a great way to start your path and give you a foundation. But from what I've seen, making the leap from online learning to a full-fledged position by itself is not too common. But I think that a data science boot camp, or at least the one that we took a couple of years ago, and what the market was at least then, really is a sweet spot in terms of getting your first job. But I do think that expectations should be set, that depending the job that you get after a boot camp is very dependent on the sort of thing that you were doing before the boot camp. Some people come to boot camps as teachers, and then they're able to great grade school teachers, and then they do the data science boot camp, and then they come out the other side as analysts. Some people have PhDs and come out the other side as data scientists who are focused on the research or perhaps like the more custom algorithms, or something slightly more technical. And then if you have more of an analyst or data background, and you might be able to kind of be a, kind of a data scientist working on the pipeline of building the models. So while those things by themselves are not enough necessarily to get the role, I think that is a great way of supercharging your resume, because the curriculum that they have is often much more up to date than what you see in other data science programs. What do you guys think?
It's a hard one. And it also depends on what company you aspire to work at, or what kind of company you aspire to work at. If you're going to go to someone like Google, Facebook, Meta, they can be really choosy. They can afford to take only PhDs from top tier programs, right? Because they get how many thousand applicants per position for the roles there. But there's a huge demand for data scientists, right? Most companies now need them. And there aren't enough PhDs, there aren't enough master's degree people to go around. And so many are now looking to boot camps to do that. And what I generally find is some companies have a snobbishness, but they are often pretty explicit about that. You can tell by job descriptions what they're looking for on there and kind of how snobbish they're going to be. But many are not. Many either can't afford to be or don't want to be, or also that people from boot camps I tend to come in with more applied skills than master's degree folks, right? A lot of master's degree folks that come in maybe have a deeper theory background than even PhD folks than the boot campers, because they've been in a theoretical program for a lot longer, but often their coding skills are much weaker, right? They require a lot more effort to bring their coding up to scratch for a professional kind of standard of coding. Boot campers tend to have much higher levels of coding. The boot camps really kind of put that into you very, very strongly, but less theory work. So as long as what someone's going to come in, what skills they're going to come in with, you can design your kind of new hire program. And that's what we do here, to kind of build on the strengths and kind of fill in for some of the weaknesses of the background that person comes in with. And I see someone said, do you need a PhD to kind of get a data science position? On this team, only I have the PhD, right? None of our other data science team members have PhDs. So the answer is emphatically no. You don't need a PhD, unless you're looking to go and work for something like Google, where they might require that, especially in their research units.
Awesome, thank you. Can I ask too, how long is a typical boot camp? Like, what does it consist of?
It depends. I know the one that we did was full-time, 3 months, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and yeah. So it's pretty intense. But with that, then like learning anything, it's all about learning the language of things. So, and a lot of the sure, after class, like we'd have homework or stuff to look into, that there's definitely space for that. But also when you're just kind of living it like that, your ability to like learn the language and the patterns is just increased by a lot, and in our case it was I guess it was 2 teachers, but it was all the curriculum was just one thing, and that's different than say a master's program where there's a number of different teachers, and sure, they may talk broad strokes what they want the overall offerings to be, but things are going to vary from teacher to teacher. In a data science program, it's going to be a lot more focused. But that's not the only type. There are other ones, that are like 6 months part-time. My wife had done a like a UX UI boot camp that was like that. The part-time stuff really blows my mind, because you still have to work a job and then have enough mental energy to do more beyond that. But that's kind of the flow, I think, of a lot of them. Trying to get as much of the information as quick. Usually do a big capstone at the end, and that kind of helps market yourself as to show people that you've got that you can cut the snuff, you know.
Awesome, thank you. It looks like we do have another question in the chat related to the boot camps, and Jonathan is wondering what boot camp you guys had attended. Can you share that?
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore as a data science boot. Yeah, we all did Galvanize, which acquired what did it acquire, Lee?
Hack Reactor.
Yeah,
Hack
it
Reactor.
acquired Hack Reactor, which is a boot camp for front-end web development. And then they have since doubled down on the web development side of things.
But I actually mentor. I'm a mentor for the Thinkful bootcamp on the side, like kind of as an extra thing that I do. That's an online only bootcamp, but it's you know, from what I see, it's fairly robust. And a nice thing about that bootcamp is they pair you up with an industry mentor who's actually a working data scientist. Like a bunch of people have me as their mentor there. So you actually get someone who's currently in the field, working in the field, who has contacts and networks in the field. To kind of work with you as well. I mean, my role there is not to teach them stuff, although it's they have some problems in the material, they can go over it. But my job mostly is to show them what it's like to be a real data scientist in industry. It's to kind of give them some contacts and to help them with a bit of networking and those kind of soft skills that are also crucially important to getting a position here, right? And it kind of relates to a previous question, but a friend of mine works for she's a VP at a big bank. She gets 3,000 applicants per position that she, opens up. 3,000, right? What are the odds of you even getting an interview there? Very, very small. But if you know people, or you can get a warm introduction to that person, your odds are much higher of getting an interview, right? So there's also a networking element to this as well, to help you get a position that's really important and helpful, which we can cover later if people want to.
Thank you, guys. Our next question is, should I learn R or Python first?
Trevor, you can go first on this one.
Well, for me, I don't know R. I'm all Python 100%. So, and that has served me very well so far. So yeah, my vote is for Python.
All right, thank you.
We can extrapolate on that a little bit probably, because it is a common question.
Sure.
I started with R, and now I'm Python all of the time, and I think that there are definitely pros and cons to both, but to me it is pretty obvious at this point that Python is the most frequently used. I think that R has a better, more focused community, which makes it really nice for learning, and kind of like getting into these things and learning some of the patterns. But it is a little bit less flexible of a language. When you're using R, you are using R for statistics, for machine learning, and that's really kind of it. People have done some amazing things to expand the language, but that's really the bread and butter of that language. Python is a utility language, which can do large data processing, and it can do web, albeit a little bit awkwardly. It's got a very strong scientific community as well. So what it loses in kind of having that cozy focused community, it gains in, if you know Python, then you can do all of the parts of the machine learning life cycle pretty much, from inception to the ML ops of it all to deployment, and it's going to be a lot easier to interface with the engineers that you're working with, because they are more likely to be doing Python themselves.
Also, playing the numbers game, more companies looking for Python on job specs than they are R. Python's normally the required one. R's normally a nice to have. Not all companies, right? There are some that are R focused. Some of our clientele are R focused shops, but the majority will have Python as their primary coding language.
Great, thank you. The last question that I have is, do you write algorithms from scratch?
I used to. Back when I started, we had to, yes. However, I haven't done that for many years now. Yeah, so back before kind of, we had Python, or before it was so popular as it is now and has all the extra languages and stuff, I was coding in Fortran, C++, and MATLAB, and we didn't have machine learning libraries. So yeah, if you wanted to use a random forest, if you wanted to use a regression, you had to go ahead and code it yourself first. But that hasn't been the case now for many years. I think I haven't done anything from scratch in 6 or 7 years now. Yeah, I might assemble a complex algorithm from all the parts, right? And the assembly might be kind of done, but each component I'll use what's already been built rather than building it myself. I hate to reinvent the wheel. It really just frustrates me and annoys me to have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, there's much better versions of pretty much every algorithm already out there than anything that I would be want to try to do from scratch. Like, there's so much money, there's so much research going into the field that you'll hear about a new type of algorithm, like to use one that's already a couple of years, that's not as new as it was, as like BERT, that it's like a NLP algorithm, and I started hearing whispers about it, and then it was like, you can just download it from Hugging Face almost like immediately, and you're off to the races. Like, the community out there really has removed a lot of the needs for building these lower level things from scratch, which really helps you focus on solving the problem. What are you trying to predict, rather than focusing on how do I get this freaking algorithm to work?
Thank you. It looks like we do have another one in the chat. We have a couple, actually. The first one is, what is a good entry-level job to enter into the data scientist role?
Yeah, so for entry level, I would say be open to internships. That was something initially I was kind of hesitant to do, but after actually going through it, that was, it was a game changer. Having, a lower barrier to entry with an internship and getting to learn a lot of tools and getting the skill set built up and being able to demonstrate that was very beneficial. And I mean, it directly led to a full-time position. So I'd say entry level, be open to internships. I mean, not all of them are going to be great, and some of them might not lead anywhere. But it is something to consider, especially if you don't have necessarily the strongest technical background. Yeah, and I mean, just try and find something that a job posting that might match your skill set. So, if they're looking a lot more heavily into machine learning, if you have a machine learning background, or if you're stronger in stats, try to find job listings that are stronger in stats, because once you kind of get your foot in the door, you can kind of expand your skill set and kind of move on from there. But yeah, getting the first job is the hardest, though.
Thank you, Trevor.
And if you're career changing, let's say, this wouldn't apply for maybe being a fresh graduate, but let's say you've got a couple of years at least doing something, like Andrew's example, with some experience in finance and some stuff in healthcare, analytics. There is a demand for people who know about a field to become data scientists in that field. So let's say you're career changing, you've done some kind of online learning, a boot camp, a master's degree, whatever it happens to be, looking for positions, that are also, that utilize your additional skills that you bring to the table. If you're a teacher, education technology companies want teachers because they understand the system. Healthcare companies, I once had a friend who was a nurse, and he, got a job with a healthcare startup. He did a conversion, data science conversion. and was snapped up by a healthcare company because of his nursing background. So, because again, he understood the language, he understood the domain knowledge that comes there. That's also a thing to think about as well. What skills do you already have? What domain expertise do you already have? And, can you look for entry-level roles that, as well as the new skills you've learned required, kind of tie into that pretty strongly. Andrew?
Yes, and I was also going to say, depending on where you are in your journey, going down the route, at least for a while, of being a data engineer is really, really useful. And that can end up being a competitive advantage. So it can be a step towards becoming a data scientist if that's your end goal. A couple of things we consider here. Number one, I think that if you think that you are going to be a data scientist and you don't like data engineering, I've got some bad news for you, because you're going to be doing a lot of data engineering as a data scientist. The second thing is that will help you get your competitive advantage, or at least it helped me. Being able to get your data yourself, clean it yourself, do it with best practices, and being able to communicate with the data engineering team, and being able to speak both languages quite well is, I think, really, really useful. And something that Lee and I talk about a lot is there's definitely a glorification of the data scientist role, but in order to solve a data science problem, there's always people involved more than just the data scientists themselves. So you can learn a lot about data science from a data scientist if you are able to be a data engineer at a company that does data science, or if you are doing a lot of projects with data scientists. It's a great way to be able to learn the tools. And if you know the data science side, they're more likely to loop you in on those types of projects as well. We're consultants, and so we get to work with a lot of different people, and it's always nice if I'm working with a data engineer who's either had some education or some background, so that I can more easily speak the language with them. That makes sense?
And there's one more thing as well I'd add. Another route in can be with the analyst kind of role. So person who knows Power BI, Tableau, Alteryx, kind of one of these dashboarding and analytical tools. And we have an entire set of people here at Toulon who are just deep experts in Power BI, and it's deep enough that that's their whole job, and they're very, very good at it. I'm kind of in awe of what they can make that tool do. That's not a possible way in, right? There's a number of complementary angles between tools like Power BI and Tableau and data science. But the flip side of that, though, is that it's because those tools are so inherently valuable to companies, and that role is so valuable to companies, and it's again also in such high demand at a company, you might end up getting pigeonholed into that position, right? And if you get good enough at it, they won't want you to leave that position because you're generating so much value. So in fact, we've had some friends who become analysts and have been kind of unable to move into the more machine learning side of things, or they've had challenges doing that because of all the value they were adding. Kind of as an analyst, the company kind of wanted to keep them there to some extent. So if you are going to say go down the analyst route, the kind of or the engineer route, the kind of complementary fields to the data science field, make sure that your path is kind of clear to becoming a data scientist, or you might end up, I wouldn't say stuck, because these are also very valuable and very interesting roles to be in, right? But again, it's about where your passion lies and what you want to end up doing, right? So
yeah. And then another point to kind of add to this is, if you are able to, with your investment in data science, you've done a boot camp, you've done all this learning, you've done projects, whatever, if you are able to get a job at a, sort of blue chip firm like Microsoft or Facebook or Google as an analyst or as a data engineer, the odds that a great company is going to later on be willing to hire you as a data scientist, because you may have not been like the data scientist on that side, but one of my friends, for instance, was a data engineer at Facebook. They hadn't done data engineering before. They did they were an analyst. They did the boot camp. They were able to become a data engineer at Facebook, and now they're a data scientist at Reddit. So being able to take that other job, elsewhere. And again, I think that all these jobs are great. It's just slightly different tools and slightly different vernaculars, but everybody's trying to do the same thing.
Thank you all. So much helpful information. We have another question in the chat that says, data science is a huge field. I've learned Python and R, Tableau, and have done applied machine learning specialization in Coursera. But I'm wondering in which area I should focus to get industry exposure, like in NLP, deployment of models in image processing.
What are you passionate about? All of these are important areas in industry, as well as just being a generic data scientist, on Tableau data. What it comes down to most is, what are you most interested in? Do you want to be a generalist? I'm a generalist, right? I take pride in the fact that I can solve a ton of problems, but I'm not massively deep in any one field like NLP or computer vision, right? I can go some of the way down, but not all the way down. Other people love computer vision and they want to be a deep specialist in computer vision, and that gives them passion, that excites them, it makes their day. So that is what I kind of say is the key thing. What interests you? Which of these areas, if any of them, fascinates you the most? Trevor's found a great deal of pleasure in the deployment and the ML ops story, right? I've got friends who are just NLPs all they do, all day, every day, and they absolutely love it. It makes them very, very happy. So that's my 2 cents, is what interests you, what brings you the most passion, because when you come to interview for a job, you will always interview better where you have passion, like genuine passion, not just like saying, oh, I'm passionate about this. No, I mean, like, what actually excites you? Kind of what can you stand in front of somebody and just talk about with excitement, right? And get people, fired up on that area. So that's my 2 cents. But Andrew, Trevor, feel free to, give your opinions.
Yeah, I definitely say, focus on, definitely your passion, but also definitely make sure like the total life cycle of, like data science. So kind of like what Andrew was alluding to is, be familiar with like the data ingestion side of things. Very good to know like at least one of the major cloud computing services, Azure, Google, AWS. Be not necessarily an expert on those, but be familiar with that, know how to, deploy some resources, even if so just kind of basic resources, know how to kind of work in those environments and know at least the basics on, like model deployment. So just try and, focus most on your passion, but just be aware of the, the life cycle of the data science workflow.
I would say all of this is good. I agree with it. Of the list that was said, machine learning specialization, R, Tableau. For this specific person, I would say SQL. And I would say that many data scientists should have a really good grasp on SQL, because there's many days that I am using more SQL than Python, because we are trying to work with the data. So I would say that is like a tool in your toolkit that that should be very sharp, because that determines how quickly you can get information. And it's kind of like we were saying before, that way you're fighting the data less. You know, you're able to focus on the problem rather than figuring out where and how to get the data. And then similar to obviously find something that is interesting to you, but then also think about ideally the thing that interests you is also going to be something where there is a demand for it in the market. So you have to kind of consider, what does competition look like in computer vision? And like, is it your dream to be rubbing shoulders with people at Tesla doing autonomous cars? Well, that's going to be kind of a tough thing to do. How much of that has already been done? Sort of things. But figuring out like what is an up and coming tool that more and more people are adopting that need to be done. And when I say tool, it can be an algorithm or like a tool itself. A couple of years ago, when people would ask a question like this, I would say things like learning Spark is really attractive because there's not enough people who know Spark, and there's a lot of people who are adopting it. So if you're excited by big data processing, Spark is a great example. ML Ops is a big conversation in the industry. So like what Trevor was saying, being able to understand what ML Ops is and being able to say that you're good at deploying models is really attractive. So on your search, make sure that you first level, follow your dreams, yes, but it's nice when your dreams are in demand. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind.
Thank you. The next one is, what IDE do you guys use on your day-to-day?
Quick fire round then. Okay, for me it's VS Code.
I wish that I could use Emacs for everything, but since we do a lot of stuff on the cloud and on Azure, VS Code plugs in really nicely, and you can even use the notebooks on virtual machines in VS Code. That's really nice.
Yep, same here. VS Code. Yeah, like Andrew's saying, there's just a lot of good integration with what we're using with VS Code, so it makes it a pretty easy choice for us.
That say, I do think that the best development IDE that exists is RStudio, and nothing is as good for Python as RStudio, and I cannot recreate it in VS Code or anything else. It's so good, and I don't know why the open source community hasn't shoehorned it better. I know that Spider exists, but like that's not being actively maintained, and it doesn't feel good.
And in the past, in prior roles, not so much here, but PyCharm, again, it's very, very Python related. But PyCharm IDE also is a good choice for Python. Under certain conditions.
I feel like PyCharm is way too bloated for a lot of data sciencey things, though. It's we're just talking opinions here.
Oh yeah, these are all opinions. I mean,
yeah.
at this point in time, I've got friends that use Sublime for their stuff. People use Jupyter Lab. Huge range of possibilities that you kind of could go down.
Awesome. The next question is, which would you say are more valuable skills to someone entering the field, the coding skills or understanding the theory? See Trevor thinking hard on that one.
Yeah, I mean, the theory is incredibly important, but having the ability to write, good, clean code is pretty invaluable. If you're working a team and your code is a little on the sloppy side or hard to follow, that's just going to cause a lot of issues with the team. So I would probably lean, a little more towards coding skills. But again, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you actually, and this is not to say that the theory isn't important because it is important. So to like, if you are a developer and you're trying to come in, I talked to Lee about this a lot, and you're trying to come into data science, you're going to be able to use all the APIs and all of that, and you're going to be able to like look at the Titanic data set, and you're going to be able to get an output and make a prediction, and that's great. And then you're going to try to do something else, and you're going to mess up because everything is all about nuance. Like the coding is not terribly hard, um, but there is like a lot of nuance in the theater. There's a lot of nuance in how do you position the problem and position the theory. All of that is to say, though, you can't put theory into production. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. If you're a phenomenal coder but a bad data scientist, you can do some pretty significant damage. But if you really don't know how to code, then I can't teach you the nuance because we're going to be spending so much time getting the outputs to happen. So the answer is both, but I think that being able to show that you write clean code is, again, if you're looking at the market, that if people look at your GitHub repos and they see a spidery mess or well-documented doc strings, things wrapped up into functions, et cetera, it's going to be a lot more attractive.
So I'm going to kind of take a slightly different tack and say it depends on the kind of career path you're looking for. So if you want to go and become a researcher and want to do ML research, theory, code is almost irrelevant, right? Somebody else will come along and, kind of clean up your messy code. In fact, I've had that role in the past, right? Took some researchers' messy code and turned it into something that was actually usable. Miserable experience, mind you, not fun, but it's there. If they kind of you're looking to be, we're consultants here, we solve business problems, right? We don't really care about, the model is less important than the solution to the problem that we're trying to solve for somebody, or making their lives better in some useful, powerful way. So in that case, kind of coding is really important because we deploy everything that we do to production, right? We don't do experimentation. Well, we experiment as part of our process, but we don't do, science projects. We do, things that get to production. So what level of code kind of do I look for, or theory do I look for when I'm saying to learn for people, right? I'm looking for, are you deep enough that you can, if an algorithm is going wrong, you can debug it? Okay, if your random forest isn't performing well, just to use a simple algorithm that is well known and understood, let's say it's running out of memory. Well, how does the memory scaling work, and why does that happen? Because that helps you debug a code problem, helps you debug a real problem there. How deep should my trees be? How wide should they be? How should I split things? Kind of that level of theory is important because that's directly applicable to the work that we do, right? It's a way of debugging the math behind what's going on. Do I expect, the people I interview to be able to, tell me how, backpropagation works in a neural network in like super levels of detail? No, right? That's kind of a level of theory beyond kind of where it's useful for the kind of work that we do here. So it's really kind of a balance of knowing enough theory to be able to debug things, deal with the nuance behind the problems and to set them up right. But not say so much theory that you need that you're, able to do all the math behind every neural network that's ever been created. And that balance will be different for different companies with different competing priorities and different teams and what they're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. It looks like we have a follow-up question from a previous question. It looks like mostly I have SQL and Tableau experience as an analyst, but I want to switch to data scientist. So I've learned R and Python and have an M.L specialization. Model deployment is an excellent skill. Can you suggest one more skill to be a generalist data scientist?
I have two, if people want to hear my two. Communication skills, right? Can you, if you build a model, can you communicate that back to the business and help them understand why it's useful to them? A lot of data scientists aren't good at that. And that causes all kinds of problems, right? If your business stakeholder can't understand why you're doing what you're doing and how it improves their life, you've got nothing, right? No matter how good your model is, you've literally got nothing. And then second one is business requirements, right? Talking to the business and getting the actual, what does this model actually need to do? Because you can build a great model, but if it doesn't do what people expect it to do in the way it's meant to do it, again, you've got nothing, right? So they're both soft skills. They're not kind of technical skills, but those are things that are really key skills. And at least for this team here that you see, and really for most data science teams in most companies outside of research units. So those are my two, but I'll pass the buck to Andrew and Trevor to find some more.
Yeah, I was gonna. Lee's right. The communication skills, being able to have projects that you can have on GitHub that showcase your communication skills, and like communication skills means a lot of different things, but if you can show your results in a way that is interesting, you mentioned Tableau, so if you're able to like create your results and have like one of the public Tableau things, and you can filter and look at it, and it tells a good story. That is great, because what we see is a lot of people, who are data scientists, they go Greek, if you will. They start talking about a solution that they had, and then they'll throw some formulas up on the, on the slideshow, and then go into the details of how the algorithm works, and nobody cares. I don't care, at least not in the context of whether it's solving the problem or not. And that's like could be the most exciting part of the problem for the data scientist, but the business person is caring, do the numbers go up? So being able to focus on telling the story in a way that highlights the things that are interesting to other people rather than the things that are just interesting to you is important.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of what both Lee and Andrew have said, definitely incorporating like the soft skills and kind of like the larger view. And then, I mean, you already have a bunch of skills listed there, so like being able to kind of, bring a whole story to kind of connect all the dots there. So you already know SQL, you have some machine learning specializations, some model deployment. So we're trying to create a link between all those elements, and then incorporating like the Tableau experience as well to show you have the whole story. You have the skill set to tell the whole story from start to finish.
Awesome, thank you. But now it looks like we are caught up with our questions in the chat. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to ask? We are getting close to time too.
So what people are kind of thinking, I'll throw a thing out there. So I mentioned earlier on kind of networking, right? And other ways that you can use to make yourself a more attractive candidate to people, right? To employers that are looking. And like almost every role that I've got kind of over the last 7 years, I've got through some kind of networking, right? Or made myself a better candidate for the role by networking, right? So that could look like a few ways, right? One, LinkedIn is a fabulous tool, right? Indeed, some people who are on this call have already connected me on LinkedIn prior to this session going on, and we've already had some conversations about a few things. Okay, people who do that come onto the radar, right? the hiring manager or a senior person in that team now knows who you are, right? So that's a plus. Your name, you're no longer just a name and a number. You're now a name, a face, and a conversation. So that's very helpful. Going to meetups and meeting people in person, right, also can help a lot. We're humans, we're still social animals. Whilst that can be stressful for people, especially introverts, there's ways of doing it in person or say over LinkedIn or other kind of less in-person things that can kind of suit a range of different personality and communication styles. And that way, rather than being one of 3,000 people, you can become one of the 20 people who the hiring manager actually knows there when you apply. So that's also a helpful way of kind of getting, potentially getting yourself in the door. Andrew, Trevor, anything to add to the kind of the networking story?
No, it exactly like you said, most jobs are because somebody knows somebody. So become the person that they can know.
I like that. Thank you. It looks like I think we can wrap up. We didn't receive any more questions in the chat. So I guess for closing, I did want to let everybody know or remind you that this session was recorded. So we will send it in an email tomorrow, and then we will post it on social. So make sure to follow us on LinkedIn, add us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And then everyone that had presented, Lee, Andrew, and Trevor, their contact information is on the screen. And the follow-up email that you will receive tomorrow has all of their links to their LinkedIn and links to their emails as well. So I guess thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.